I've been putting off telling this story for almost 6 years now, mostly because I don't know how to say it without sounding like every other ranger who swears they saw a shadow figure at the tree line. I'm not one of those guys. I worked backcountry patrol for 4 seasons, and if anything, I was the ranger who rolled his eyes when the seasonal hires started swapping campfire stories about the North District. I still think most of that stuff is guys with too much time alone in a tower talking themselves into things. But something happened on one of my last solo overnights that I've never been able to explain, and it's the reason I asked for a desk assignment the following spring. I was stationed at a remote outpost about 9 miles past the last trailhead, the kind of post where you go 2, sometimes 3 days without seeing another human being. My radio contact was a ranger named Dale, who worked the adjacent section and checked in with me every night around 9 to confirm we were both accounted for before the overnight shift. It was routine, same time, same 3 or 4 lines, every single night for weeks. Post 4, radio check. Copy, post 4 here, all quiet. That was it. You'd think something that repetitive would put you to sleep, and most nights it did. On this particular night, the check-in came in at 9, right on schedule. Except it wasn't Dale's voice. It was close enough that if I hadn't worked with the guy for 2 seasons I might not have noticed. But there was something flattened about it, like a recording played back through a bad speaker. It said the same line Dale always said, word for word, but the rhythm was wrong. A half second too slow between the 2 halves of the sentence, like whoever was on the other end was reading it instead of saying it. I keyed back and asked him to repeat. He did, and it sounded normal that time, completely normal, so I let it go. Radios drop signal out there constantly, bounce off the canyon walls, pick up static from God knows where. I didn't think much more about it until close to midnight, when the radio clicked on again, unprompted, and the exact same line played back to me. Not a similar line. The exact same line, same slowed down rhythm, same half-second gap, word for word what I'd heard 3 hours earlier. Dale wasn't supposed to check in again until morning. I sat there for a long minute trying to talk myself into a reasonable explanation, and for what it's worth, I only let myself do that once, because after that first attempt, nothing about it felt reasonable anymore. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside the cabin to get a better signal, thinking maybe I could raise dispatch directly. That's when I heard it again, except this time it wasn't coming through the radio. It was coming from somewhere out past the tree line, maybe 40 yards off, and it was my own voice, not Dale's. Mine, saying the same line back to me in that same flattened, half-slow rhythm, drifting out of the dark like it was being played off a recorder somebody had found in my cabin. I want to be clear that I didn't go looking for it. I got back inside, locked what passed for a door out there, and sat with my back against the wall until first light. Radio off, lantern burning low so I wouldn't waste the oil. Every so often I'd hear it again, always distant, always the same handful of lines cycling through in that same voice that wasn't quite mine and wasn't quite Dale's either, like something out there had recorded us both over the weeks and was stitching the pieces back together to see what would make me open the door. By sunrise it had stopped completely. When Dale finally checked in for real at his normal morning time, his voice sounded exactly like it always had. Easy, a little gravelly, nothing off about it at all. I asked him if he'd tried reaching me again after our 9 p.m. check-in. He said no, he'd gone straight to sleep after our first call, same as every other night. I put in the transfer request about 2 weeks later, told my supervisor it was for personal reasons, which wasn't exactly a lie. I've talked to 2 other rangers since then who worked that same district over different years, and neither one brought up anything like it until I asked directly, and even then, both of them got quiet in a way that told me more than whatever they ended up saying out loud. I still don't have a theory that holds together. It wasn't an animal. Animals don't recite dialogue back to you with the right rhythm attached, wrong as it was. And it wasn't a person, Not unless that person had somehow recorded 3 hours of my radio traffic and my coworker's voice and found a way to play it back to me from 40 yards into the trees, with no equipment, no footprints, and no explanation the search team could ever turn up when I finally reported it. All I know is that I don't take overnight posts by myself anymore, and if the radio ever repeats itself twice in one night, I'm already out the door before I let myself think about why. I want to start by saying I've worked search and rescue for 11 years, and in that time I've pulled people out of situations that should have killed them. Situations where the physics of what happened made sense even when the outcome felt like a miracle. I've seen exposure cases, falls, people who got turned around in a whiteout and somehow walked out fine. I'm telling you all that so you understand I'm not someone who reaches for supernatural explanations first. My job is finding rational answers for things that look irrational at first glance, and I'm usually good at it. But there's a stretch of trail in the Ridge District that I still can't account for, no matter how many times I've walked through it in my head afterward, and it's the only call I've ever refused to take a second time. It happened during my 3rd season, on a route I'd hiked probably 40 times by then. 6 miles out, 6 miles back, a straight shot along the spine of the ridge with maybe 400 feet of elevation changed the whole way, exposed the entire distance with a drop-off on one side and a rock wall on the other. I could have walked it blind. That's not an exaggeration either, because for about 90 minutes that afternoon, I basically did. I'd gone out to check on a reported campfire near mile 3, a standard patrol call. Nothing unusual about it. The hike out was completely normal. Clear skies, decent pace. I found the site cold and abandoned, no one around, logged it, and started back the way I came. That's when the first thing happened that I noticed but didn't think much of at the time. I passed a trail marker I recognized, the one at mile 2 with the bent post from where a truck had clipped it years before, and figured I was making good time on the return leg. 20 minutes later, I passed it again. I want to be clear about what I mean by that. Not a marker that looked similar. The same marker, same bend in the post, same faded paint peeling off in the same pattern I'd noticed 100 times before. I stood there trying to work out how I'd looped around without noticing, because the trail at that section physically doesn't loop. There's nowhere to loop to. It runs in a straight corridor along the ridge, and short of climbing the rock wall or going off the drop-off, there's only one direction to walk. I told myself I must have gotten turned around thinking about something else, which happens more than people realize when you've walked a route enough times that your body does it without your brain paying attention. I kept walking, paying closer attention this time, watching the terrain instead of drifting, checking landmarks I knew beyond just the marker, a lightning-split pine, a rock outcrop shaped like a fist. 15 minutes later, same marker. Bent post, faded paint. I hadn't stopped moving, hadn't turned back, and hadn't walked in a circle on a trail with a cliff on one side and a wall on the other. That's when I stopped rationalizing it and started actually trying to solve it. I pulled my GPS unit and checked my position against the topo map. According to the device, I was exactly where I should have been, 3/4 of a mile past the marker, moving in the correct direction at a normal pace, tracking a clean line east. The unit was telling me one thing and my eyes were telling me another, and for the first time in 11 years of doing this job, I genuinely didn't know which one to trust. I decided to just keep walking forward and stop looking at the marker at all, on the theory that if I quit fixating on it, whatever was happening would sort itself out. The next 20 minutes were some of the longest of my life, because the ridge trail is exposed the entire way. No tree cover, nowhere to lose sight of your surroundings, and I could see the whole stretch ahead of me the entire time. I watched myself approach the bent post marker a 3rd time. I watched the fist-shaped rock come up on my left exactly where it always does. I watched it happen, in full daylight, with nowhere to hide a duplicate trail even if someone had wanted to build one, and there was nothing I could point to that explained how. By that point, it was close to 5, and the light was starting to go orange the way it does right before it drops fast up there. I made the call to radio in and request someone meet me at the trailhead, mostly because I wanted another set of eyes confirming I wasn't losing my mind. Dispatch came back and told me my last check-in had already put me at the trailhead, 40 minutes earlier. I hadn't made that call. I was 3 miles out, standing at a marker I'd now passed 3 separate times on a trail that doesn't allow for it, and someone, or something, had radioed in using my call sign to say I was somewhere I very much was not. I stopped trying to understand it logically after that, and just started walking, fast, watching my feet instead of the horizon, counting my own steps out loud so I'd have something to track besides the landmarks that weren't behaving. Somewhere in there I stopped hearing my own footsteps land in time with my strides. It was close enough that I might not have noticed if I hadn't been listening for exactly that. But there was a half step of delay, like something behind me was matching my pace a beat too late, adjusting each time I sped up. I didn't turn around to check. I kept my eyes forward, and I didn't stop moving until the trailhead parking lot came into view, and when it did, it was there immediately. No marker, no loop, no orange light dragging on longer than it should have. I got in my truck, called it in as a false alarm on the campfire, and drove straight to the ranger station instead of home. The part that stayed with me isn't really the marker or the footsteps. It's what came back on my GPS log when I pulled the full track that night. According to the device, my route out and back that day was a clean, straight line, exactly what it should have looked like. No doubling back, no loop, nothing unusual on the map at all. But the timestamp gap between 2 waypoints less than a quarter mile apart was 51 minutes. Walking pace on flat ground, that distance should take about 5. I've had 2 other rangers look at that log since then, both experienced with the equipment, and neither one has been able to explain the gap. One suggested a satellite dropout, but the unit recorded continuously the whole time. No error flags, no signal loss noted anywhere in the data. Whatever happened out there, the machine caught the missing time even though it never caught whatever caused it, and dispatch still has a call on record that I never made, logged in a voice the on-duty operator swore was mine. I brought it up once at a district meeting, framed carefully as a question about GPS reliability in canyon terrain, and watched 2 of the older seasonal rangers go quiet in a way that told me they'd heard something like it before, even if neither one offered anything further. Nobody in that room asked me a single follow-up question, which felt stranger than if they had. I still work that district. I still hike that stretch of trail when I have to. But I don't go out there without a second person anymore, and if my GPS ever shows me somewhere I don't remember walking to, I stop, I radio it in immediately, and I don't try to explain it to myself until I'm back at the truck. This one doesn't have anything supernatural in it, at least not that I can prove, and honestly that's what makes it worse for me than the stuff other rangers swap around the station. I've spent 11 seasons dealing with real physical danger out there. Bears, rockfall, hypothermia, the kind of stuff you train for and respect but don't lie awake over. This is the only night from my whole career I still think about before I fall asleep, and it happened almost exactly 5 years ago on a call that never should have gone the way it did. I was working solo night patrol, which we did back then in the lower traffic season before the district changed policy and started requiring a second unit after dark. Dispatch got a call around 11 from a man claiming his girlfriend had gone off trail near the switchbacks and hadn't come back after almost 2 hours, said she had a bad ankle and couldn't have gotten far. Standard stuff. Happens 2 or 3 times a season. I got the coordinates, radioed my position, and headed out. The location he gave dispatch was oddly specific for someone who claimed to be panicking, a numbered junction point that most visitors don't even know exists because it isn't marked on the public map, only on the ranger overlay. I didn't think much of it at the time. Some hikers use offline GPS apps that show every junction, and plenty of regulars know that trail well enough to give exact coordinates under stress. When I got to the junction, There was no one there. No hiker, no boyfriend waiting anxiously. Nobody. I called it in and started a standard grid search from the last known point, working outward in the dark with my headlamp and a handheld spotlight, calling her name every few dozen yards the way you're trained to. About 20 minutes in, I found fresh boot prints heading off the marked trail into dense brush, small enough to be a woman's, deep enough that whoever left them had been moving fast. I followed them for maybe a quarter mile before they just stopped at the edge of a dry creek bed. No continuation on the other side. Nothing. I stood there scanning with the spotlight and radioed dispatch to relay what I'd found and ask if the boyfriend had given any more details. That's when the first thing felt wrong. Dispatch told me the boyfriend had called back twice more while I was out there, and each time the description of the girlfriend's injury had changed. First, it was a twisted ankle. Then it was a fall down a slope with a possible head injury. Then, on the third call, he said she'd been gone almost 4 hours, which didn't match his original timeline by a wide margin. Small inconsistencies happen with panicked callers, but these weren't small, and each version had come in calm, almost rehearsed, according to the dispatcher who took them. I kept working the grid anyway, because that's the job. Injury reports don't always add up, and you don't get to stop a search, because a timeline feels off. What actually stopped me was something at the creek bed I hadn't noticed on my first pass. There was a second set of prints overlapping the first, larger, a man's stride, and they didn't lead toward the woman's tracks. They led away from them, back in the direction of the main trail, back toward where I'd parked. I radioed my position again and started back myself, faster than a normal search pace, telling myself it was just proper caution and nothing more. Though even as I thought it, I didn't fully believe it. When I got back to the junction, my truck was exactly where I'd left it, locked, nothing disturbed that I could see in the dark. But there was a boot print on the hood, a single clear print pressed into the dust, facing toward the driver's door, like someone had stood there looking in. I sat in that truck for a long time before I moved it, doors locked, spotlight sweeping the tree line every few seconds. Dispatch tried raising the boyfriend's number one more time to get an update, and it went straight to a disconnected line. No voicemail, nothing. There was no missing persons report on file anywhere in the county for a woman matching any of the descriptions he'd given, and no cell tower activity in the area matching the number he'd called from, according to what came back the following week. I drove out of there with my headlights off for the first quarter mile, which in hindsight probably wasn't the smartest call given the terrain, but I didn't want to be an easy thing to track from a distance. Nothing followed me that I could see. I filed the report, flagged it as a possible hoax call with an unusual level of detail, and figured that would be the end of it. It wasn't quite the end of it. About 2 weeks later, another ranger in a different district took a strikingly similar call. Same structure, an injured girlfriend near an obscure junction point, the same shifting details across multiple calls. He searched, found nothing, and reported an unmarked print at his vehicle afterward too, though he hadn't heard about mine before it happened, and only mentioned it to me once we compared notes at a regional meeting the following spring. Neither of our calls ever got traced to a real phone owner. Neither search turned up a missing person, injured or otherwise. The file on mine is still open, technically, filed as an unresolved hoax with a note attached that a similar pattern was reported elsewhere. Every year around the same week in early fall, I still half expect dispatch to radio me with that exact call again, the ankle, the switchbacks, the coordinates only a ranger would know how to give. So far, it hasn't happened a third time in my district. I try not to think too hard about which district might be next.